Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a great Tuesday out there. Welcome to the Officepal Thought Leaders webinar. I'm Dilip Andra, founder and CEO of Officepal. Officepal's mission is to provide tools that enable admin professionals worldwide to be a lot more productive and successful. And so as a part of this mission, we are kicking off the Thought Leaders webinar series that will feature industry leaders and experts that are relevant to the administration and office management space. In this inaugural Thought Leaders webinar, I have Leni Miller, author and president of EASearch, joining us via video conference. Hi, Leni.
Hi, Dilip. Nice to be here.
Awesome. Great. So before I get started, a few quick housekeeping items. At any time during the webinar, if you have any questions, please use the GoToWebinar interface to type your questions. We also have 2 quick polls during the webinar, and 5 participants across these polls will receive a free copy of Leni's book, Finding the Right Work, and gifted by Leni herself. And so please stay tuned for those polls. All right, so let's get started. So Leni, you have over 35 years of experience helping admin professionals connect with right opportunities. So tell us a little bit more about your background.
Yes, Dilip, I'd love to. Thank you. I've been recruiting and placing administrative professionals really since the 70s, and you can imagine how the profession has changed since then. We used to place statistical typists and secretaries, and then we placed word processors and assistants, and then the computer came along, and we placed high-level executive assistants and administrative coordinators. So my whole career has been devoted to, one way or another, the administrative profession. I started my first company back in the late 70s, which was called McCall Staffing in San Francisco, very large permanent and temporary staffing agency. Sold my half to my partner, and then started my own large staffing agency. And then about 15 years ago, started a company called EASearch, which is a retained search firm that specializes in recruiting executive support to CEOs, high-profile individuals, and business owners and managers all over the country. So our specialty now is the very, very senior level of executive support staff, and we consult and we recruit in that space. And I've also, as Dilip mentioned, recently published a book called Finding Right Work, 5 Steps to a Life You Love, and I'm just thrilled to be able to let you know about that.
Awesome. So that's great. So what are some of the key transitions that you've seen, Leni, in the administration and executive support profession over the last 35 years?
That's just a great question, and I'm sure many of you who have been in the profession for a while are really aware of it at an experiential level. But I would say the biggest change has happened in the last 20 years as technology became fully utilized. The job used to be more of a repetitive, task-oriented, reactive role, except perhaps for the people that were supporting the CEOs, where it became a much higher level of responsibility. With the full utilization of technology, the mundane, repetitive aspect of, many, many clerical tasks was reduced dramatically. And so what I've seen most significantly is that the role itself has required a much higher level of skill, intelligence, ability, gets it factor. It requires somebody who really is extremely capable of working independently and proactively now.
I see. So it looks like you built and sold 3 recruiting companies over the last 35 years. So as a successful women entrepreneur, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned over your career?
There's so many. I think the biggest thing you learn as a business owner is that your mistakes are lessons. And the biggest lesson I think that I learned over time was just because you're really good at one thing, not to assume you can be really good at many, many things. I expanded my business a couple of times into areas I really didn't know much about, and it was a very costly error. So I think the biggest lesson is really learn who you are, learn who you are relative to what you have to offer, learn what you're good at, and then get as good as you can in those areas.
Sure. So those are really some very interesting and valuable lessons. So I think kind of that leads us into the title topic for your book, which is Finding Right Work, 5 Steps to a Life You Love. So can you tell us a little bit more about what's the inspiration behind this book, and how did you go about researching, who did you talk to, etc.?
Yeah, I would love to do that. I want to tell you, I wrote it over 10 years, if you can believe it. I started writing it right after a friend of mine and I had the privilege of working with Intel Corporation to create a marketing video series called Home Sweet Office. And Intel asked us to go find people. She was in the outplacement business, I was in the recruiting business. And they asked us to go interview people who had found work they loved and lives they loved. And this was just when technology was beginning to really be utilized by small business people and individuals to create these tiny businesses and consulting firms. And so we went out and we interviewed all different kinds of people. Some were accountants, some were digital film editors, some were lawyers, and they had somehow created lives that really worked for them around their work. So I started seeing that there were many, many people that loved their lives and were in right work. And that was juxtaposed to my years and years and years of interviewing. We were, Dilip, only paid, right, to find the right people for right jobs. In my business, a big part of what we do is really try and assess whether people are in right work. Because if they're not in right work, there's not a good chance that the jobs that we have are going to fit them in terms of executive support. So I got very sad over the years to know how few people I interviewed really felt excited and exhilarated about their work and really loved it and had lives they loved, until I did the Home Sweet Office project. And then I realized it doesn't take a rocket science to create right work. It just takes the ability to organize the project. So I started thinking I need to write a book about this, because I started seeing that all these people had gone through certain steps to get there. And that was the beginning of the book. And the book's subtitle is 5 Steps to a Life You Love. So what I've done in the book is I've created a series of stories of inspiring people who had found right work, and then really a very down-to-earth how-to as to how to make it happen. So I think the initial inspiration was seeing so many people who were in, and then the real kicker inspiration was meeting all these people during the Home Sweet Office project that loved their lives and loved their work.
Great. So how would you define right work, Leni? And can you tell us also a little bit more about how did you go about finding your right work? Did you have a clear idea from the beginning, or did you stumble upon it along the way?
Let me first talk about myself, because we all love to do that, right? But anyway, no, I started off my career, I don't know if you know this, Dilip, but I started off my career as a nurse. And my father was a doctor, and I really mostly wanted to be a doctor. But in that time, in the history of the planet, you had to be a brainiac if you were a woman to be a doctor. So of course, what did we do? We became nurses or stewardesses or social workers or librarians or whatever. So I became a nurse. And what I discovered in my second year of nursing school was that it was totally the wrong work for me. I was too empathic. Every time I met somebody in pain, I had pain. I couldn't bear it. I just couldn't bear it. And it was very difficult for me because my father was very strong presence in my life. And I went ahead and quit nursing school while he was on vacation in Mexico. I was absolutely terrified, and I jumped off this mungo cliff, but I knew it was wrong for me. You know, I just had the knowing. And when he came back, he basically told me that I, for whatever reason, had been under some illusion since I was a little girl that life should be exciting and breathlessly wonderful all the time. And so he was going to let me support my own breathless moments unless and if I ever graduated from college, in which case he'd pay me back. So I did finish college, and he did pay me back. But it was a moment when I realized that I had to not stay in that place. I had to not stay. So that was my moment of realizing what wrong work was for me. And many times wrong work is what leads you to an awareness of what right work is for you. The definition of right work, in my experience, is this. If you think about what your life priorities are now, and these change throughout life. When I was a new mom, my priorities around work were very different than they were when she left for college. You know, when she was a baby, I wanted time. When she left for college, what did I want? Money, right? So your priorities shift. So I always tell people it's easy to get 5 priorities. Let's say you know right away you want to work for a company that's doing good in the world. You know right away you want to use certain skills. You know right away this. But try and find as many priorities as you can when you do this exercise. So write them down, 5 to 10 priorities relative to life. That's a big, big key ingredient in finding right work. Secondly, what are your non-negotiable values? Those are the things that you've got to have in life or you wouldn't be who you are. For many people, it's integrity, or it could be a strong work ethic, or it could be that you really want to help solve those big world problems. But make sure you know what your values are and really take care to make sure that those are also part of what you experience in your work. And then lastly, really having an understanding of what your skills, your talents, your abilities are. You know, not just the things you know you can do, but what are the things you know you've probably had since you were small. You know, you probably, if you're really organized now, my guess is your room was pretty clean when you were 15. Well, not 15, but maybe 12. But anyway, so those are things that you can find out about through online assessments. You can find out about them through your friends, the people that know you well. Many people ask their children, what do you think mommy's really good at? Kids really know. And so you really get a sense of self-awareness about what it is you're good at. Because guess what? What you're good at is what you love to do. So the definition of right work in my book and in my belief is when your top priorities in life relative to work, your strongest values, and your top skills, abilities, and talents with your experience are all aligned in what you're doing. And when that happens, if you're really clear about it, when right work shows up, you'll recognize it because you'll feel, oh, this is so right. So that's kind of in a nutshell what right work is.
So essentially what you're talking about is really listening to yourself and to your inner voice and identifying your priorities, values, and skills, and see, you know, what's the best balance you could strike to utilize these.
You know, I just want to put a little period on that. That's so true, Dilip, and I think it's very hard these days to be self-reflective and go within because we're also plugged in to technology. We're plugged into other people's opinions, the television. Everything is externally focused. But you don't get your real, authentic answers outside of yourself. You just don't. So whether you take a walk and unplug from the music, or whether you take a moment in the morning to sit quietly before you start your day and anybody else is up, it's so important to have time for a certain amount of self-reflection.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so we'll pause here for a minute and we'll take a quick poll of the audience on, you know, which category they belong to. So here's a quick poll. which talks about which of these categories you belong to, and would love to hear back from the audience. Okay, we'll give it 5 more seconds before we close the poll.
Dilip, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, because I have a white screen. Is that supposed to be the case?
Yeah, so the poll has been launched to the audience, so I think
okay.
you'll be able to see me in a minute. All right, so I'll go ahead and close the poll. And so looks like 80% of the audience have voted. And so interestingly, 48% of the audience think that they've already found the right work, and 52% think that, you know, I know what's the wrong work for me, but I'm yet to find the right work. So I think that brings us to a great question. So what advice do you have for these people, you know, who understand what work doesn't motivate them, but they're still yet to find what's right work for them?
Okay. I hope you can see me, Dilip, because I can't see. Yeah. Okay. At any rate, my advice is to really pay attention to what is wrong about the work. And that would be being able to write down what you notice doesn't work for you, and to really, again, go within and start to get clear in the areas that we discussed earlier. In other words, pay attention to what your priorities are, do the little bit of homework in terms of understanding what your values are, and really also begin to inventory your skills, talents, and abilities, and compare those things with what's going on in your work if it feels like wrong work. I guarantee that a certain percentage of what you need to have aligned with work for it to be right will be missing. So it's the ability to observe yourself, observe your situation, and learn from it, because when you know wrong work, by definition, what is the flip side of that? You'll begin to realize what would be right work for yourself. And sometimes it's just a question of changing your attitude about it, but a lot of times it can be changing work itself.
So that kind of reminds me the Steve Jobs Stanford commencement speech, where he talks about, you know, like all things that are matter of heart, you know, when you find it, you know it, but till you find it, you know, just keep looking. Right?
Right.
That's a very, very inspiring speech.
Yeah. I think that the more clarity you have about who you really are, which is a lot of what Steve talked about in that speech, the more quickly right work shows up. And I don't mean to sound woo-woo, but the truth is that the more you know yourself and the more aware you are, the more likely you are to be able to either continue in the work that's right now or to find your right work.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think this concept of right work helps employers choose the right hires and employees choose the right jobs?
Okay, can you see me, Dilip? I'm sorry,
yeah, I can.
I don't know what to do here because I can't see you anymore.
Ah, okay. Okay, let me, I'll check that. Okay. Can you see me now?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
But I can go ahead and answer your question.
Yeah, sure.
So your question again is?
Yeah, so my question is, how does right work help employers choose the right hires and employees choose the right jobs?
Okay, good. I think the most important part of that is uh, the issue of people's priorities, because it's often the case where an employer will look at a resume and see the right experience and see the right skill set. But without going more deeply into a person's priorities, you really don't know if you've got the right person. And that means really being able to be candid with people and find out what's important to them in life now. And you know, your priorities could be, I need to work 15 minutes from home because I just had a baby. Or it could be that I want to work for a company that is really addressing world problems. Whatever those priorities are really matter to people. And if they're aligned with an employer that shares those priorities or meets those priorities and shares their values, that person is going to be more productive and is going to stay longer. And then from an employee standpoint, I always really encourage people to interview their employers before they take a job to really make sure that their priorities are going to be met, that their values are aligned, and that their strongest talents and abilities really can be fully utilized. So I would say of all those things, the most important thing of all is the priorities and the values, because sometimes we're in situations where we may not be using absolutely everything we have to offer, but you know what? It's paying the college bill and it's meeting our other priorities relative to our values and the things that are important to us or in life. So I think both employer and employee need to know what somebody's priorities are relative to work, what are their values, and make sure that these things are aligned before they get hired and before you take a job.
Great. So you're kind of leading to something around self-reliance, and I know you're also a big fan of Reid Hoffman. So am I. Founder of LinkedIn, who wrote a book called The Startup of You. And in this book, Reid talks about how everyone can be and must be an entrepreneur, right? And you're a big believer in this concept of self-reliance. Can you touch a little bit more on this?
Oh, I would love to. You know, one of the biggest traits, I would say, of successful people in this day and age, and that includes CEOs, and it includes executive assistants, that it includes lawyers and doctors and candlestick makers, and that is the ability to really take on self-reliance. What does that mean, really, to people? It means that you commit to become what you need to become, to be the best that you can be for whatever is needed. And what that means in the executive support profession is the ability to get yourself to the fastest and best training available in the newest technology. Or it means the ability to really take on responsibilities that you've never done before and learning what you need to learn to get through them well. But I think in terms of self-reliance in life, the commitment to lifelong learning is the best expression I can think of to kind of summarize it. And I did hear Reid talk at a conference recently, and the whole concept of LinkedIn is built on people connecting with people. And we aren't islands, we are all part of networks. And I think Officepal really is presenting all of us in the executive support space a wonderful opportunity to be interdependent and connected. But it takes self-reliance and commitment to lifelong learning to go out and learn these things and become a part of it. So I think the self-reliance I'm talking about is the ability to pay attention, learn what needs to be learned, stay ahead of the curve. If you're job hunting, take on the job hunting as if you were a recruiter and not wait for other people to do things for you. So self-reliance is about realizing in a way that it's up to us, but also realizing that it's up to us to create the networks and the support structures that we need to be successful. And there's no easier way to do that these days than social network platforms.
Great. So what are your views on the current job market, Leni?
Yeah, well, I think, my views of the current job market really have to do with the fact that the way we're working is changing. There is a high unemployment rate. It's my opinion that one of the reasons for that is that technology has eliminated a lot of jobs, and those jobs may or may not ever come back. But the good news is that for skilled people who have kept abreast of the talents they need to do their work in the executive support profession, there is actually a shortage of great uh, people in the job market. This has kept salaries high all over the country. The job market for executive assistants who are skilled and experienced is very good right now. Um, so when I think of the job market, again, I go back to self-reliance. You need to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to educating yourself and staying abreast of everything needed to keep yourself as valuable as possible to your managers. But if you do that, you'll never have to worry about finding a job ever. I guarantee it. So the job market is good for really top-level executive support professionals. I think it's good for people who find a need and fill it. I think you have to really be alert to the way things are changing in society and get yourself trained to what is available for you to contribute.
Mm-hmm. So you touched briefly about the high unemployment rate, and so can you talk a little bit more about that? And should some of the admin professionals in the audience who may be seeking jobs at this point of time, should they be worried?
Again, Dilip, I think the high unemployment rate to some degree is fallout from the technology revolution. You go into a factory now, and where you used to see hundreds of people, you might see 40. So I think administrative professionals really do not have to worry about high unemployment, again, unless their skills are not as strong as they might need. There's really, I'm not kidding. Employers are constantly saying to me, you know, with all these people unemployed, don't you think I can pay less for an executive assistant? And I say, no, you can't, because there's a shortage of them, and that's kept the salaries high. So I really encourage you to get the education, get the training, stay ahead of the curve, and make sure that you're in that group that's in high demand now, which is in the executive assistant arena.
Mm-hmm. And so what advice would you have to any members of the audience who might have not been successful finding a job in a while?
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's really hard to know. I think my advice would be that it could be that you're looking for jobs in all the wrong places. In the days gone by, not so long ago, we answered ads either online or in the newspaper, and then we would be invited in for an interview, and we might get a job. These days, most jobs are going through people's networks. Dilip, when he needs somebody, might reach out to all of you or to me and to say, do you know anybody like this that I could hire? And so people would start, letting their network know that Dilip is looking for somebody. And guess what? You might get a job with Dilip because you're in that network. So I would say if you've been unemployed for a while, please learn LinkedIn. It's the best job hunting tool around. And I also encourage you to read my book, because the whole book is about the need to really understand how to define your right work and then how to network yourself into your right work. But you have to take it on yourself and become your own headhunter in a way, your own recruiter. So I would say pretend you just started looking now, and really look for work only when you're clear about what you're looking for. So if you're having a hard time, sometimes it's because you're not really clear about what you're looking for. Other times it's because you're looking for work in the wrong places. There's only about a 6% chance that you'll end up in front of a hiring manager by responding to an ad either online or in the newspaper anymore. So people get discouraged because they don't have their resumes responded to. And the truth is that it's almost like buying a lottery ticket. So that's not the way to find a job these days.
Interesting. So we'll just pause here again for a minute to take a quick poll of to learn a little bit more about the audience and what stage of career they're in. So here's a poll for to understand what stage of career you're in. Okay, so we'll close out the poll in the next few seconds. Yeah, so looks like we have about 20 to 25% of the audience who are actually in entry level and mid stage in their career. So Leni, you recruit executive assistants for the CEO and the C-level, executives of all the leading companies. And so for some of the people in the audience who are, at an early stage in their career, what advice would you give them? And what are some of the traits and skills that you think they should try cultivating?
Oh, I love this question, Dilip. And, I've written a white paper, and I know you've posted it on Officepal about the 21 traits needed by top-level executive assistants. But I would say, there are a couple that stand out more than others, and I'd be happy to go over those with you.
Sure, that'd be awesome if you can. So do you want to click on the computer icon on your GoToWebinar so that document could be shared, or what I could do is maybe I could just share it at my end, and while you continue to talk. Okay, and just to know, are you still seeing me? Because I can't see you anymore. Yes. Oh, good. Yes, I can see you. Okay, so we have the document, but I just want to say that I think if you were to say to me, Dilip, pick one that's the most important, I think I would pick the whole concept of being proactive. And I'll bet if our audience were right here in the room, they would be nodding, because the big difference between kind of a clerical person and a task-oriented person and a really good assistant has to do with a proactive focus. That proactive focus is somebody who can, for example, without ever having anybody ask them to do this, put their boss's weather on their computer as they're traveling. So a story that I can tell about that was a woman told me that she always put her boss's weather on her computer so she could see what was happening to them as they traveled around the world. And this one particular time, her boss was headed off to London for a board meeting from San Francisco through Chicago. She noticed that he was headed not only through Chicago but into Newark. She noticed that he was headed right into a hurricane in Newark. And so she had him intercepted in Chicago, sent to Florida. He avoided the hurricane, and he made his board meeting in London. And great executive assistants do that minute by minute. Sometimes they have a hard time telling me a story about being proactive because it's something they do without even thinking. And that ability to be proactive is something that constantly saves time, it saves face, it saves money, and it's something that without that you cannot function at a senior level. So that's like absolutely critical for success at the senior level. And then, of course, we talked about the commitment to lifelong learning. The next thing I would talk about would be the ability to, and we laughingly call it read minds, right? So we take searches and the CEO often says, I need you to find me somebody who reads minds. And I say, okay. And why do I say that? I say because top-level executive assistants get to a point where they can read the minds of their executives.
They do that through asking questions, through listening, and it gets to a point where, they really are so close to that executive's mind that they know already what's going to be said almost. So the intuitive muscle gets better and better the more you use it, and you've got to learn to trust it. And one day you're almost reading that executive's mind. And then the ability to listen without judgment and really hear what somebody is saying, both from the standpoint of a manager and your colleagues, your teammates, vendors. It's really important to have an open listening mind and really hear what people are saying. I think then I would go to the obvious, which is the organizational skills and the maximum utilization of technology. But I think, one of the things that I know in my business, and I know is true for my great executive assistants, is they tend to have a great sense of humor. And the reason for that is they're able to remove themselves from the experience in terms of not reacting, not taking things personally, having enough self-assurance to know that they did everything they could, but they also have the ability to take themselves lightly and the situation lightly and be able to laugh at things. So a sense of humor is a very, very important trait of top executive assistants. These days, you've got to know your world, your globe. You've got to know where cities are around the world, and you've got to understand cultural differences around the world. I think the other really critical thing to know is at the senior level, the CEO or the C-level executive or the owner of a company or the managing partner are all in fire hoses every single day. There are people coming at them, there's information overload, there's scheduling overload, everything is happening so fast. So an assistant's ability to prioritize strategically, to know what's happening and how it changed and what's going on and who's on first, is a critical trait, ability, and talent at the senior level. And how you get there is really just being able to be organized, being able to be prioritized, and being able to be strategic. And that means understanding when things have changed, what things have changed, and being able to schedule and manage according to those changes without having to check in on it all the time. The other thing is, emotional intelligence is talked about a lot. And what I mean by high emotional intelligence is, again, the ability to really hold oneself separate from the distresses and stresses of the job. So that means, being able to really not take things personally when they happen or when there's a crossword, or just being able to know you did your very best and to carry on. None of us are perfect. And emotional intelligence at its highest level is an acceptance of yourself, warts and all, weaknesses and all. We're all human. We all make mistakes. And I find that, all of us who are perfectionistic, which a lot of us are, need to take ourselves a little more easily sometimes than we do, and really hold ourselves, really appreciatively for the job that we did, and not always look at what's wrong. So then I would say being able to manage up is a critical component of creating partnership with a senior executive. What does that mean, really? That means being able to push back. That means when you see something that isn't really going to work, you have the ability to say that. Now, managing up, as we all know, takes time. You don't walk in on day one and start managing up. But, after a certain number of months have gone by and trust has been developed, a CEO counts on that in a good assistant. He or she counts on the assistant's ability to be able to tell him no when it's necessary, or tell him, I think you need to change directions here if necessary. And I think that the ability to read people is also critically important. A really strong partnership between an executive and assistant is one in which the assistant is the eyes and ears of that executive and has the ability to have the schnooker factor clear when he or she believes that somebody isn't entirely who they pretend to be, right? So these are all really, really important traits, and I think that um, written and verbal communication, technology skills, all of things are kind of a given. But I would say that the role as executive assistant today has become almost a management level role, and the salaries that are happening to top level people these days reflect that. So that's kind of a real quick rundown, and I encourage you to download that sheet so you can read them more slowly.
Yeah, it's already up on Officepal blog and SlideShare, and looks like it's been very popular. It's already generated over 600 views over the last 10 days.
Oh, nice.
And
Good.
it's been shared probably over 30 times on LinkedIn, and yeah.
And if there are any traits that people discover I've missed, please email me.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So now I think we have a few questions from the audience, and so I'll go ahead and bring them up. So, so what skills do you find most desirable in the job market right now, and what are employers seeking for?
I didn't hear the last part of that, Dilip.
Yeah, so what skills do you find are most desirable in the job market right now, and what are the employers looking for?
Employers?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody knows that administrative staff has been way cut back, right? And there's a tremendous burden on many of our listeners and many administrative people because they've been doubling up and tripling up and quadrupling up. So I would say these days the strongest in-demand skills are cross-functional. And what does that mean? It means the ability to do many things within the administrative function. So being able to whip out a PowerPoint as well as be able to do event coordinating, as well as being able to do some financial administration, as well as being really facile with all kinds of software, Salesforce, and so forth. So I would say the more skills that you can develop cross-functionally right now, the more in demand you will be. And I also will say that small business is really a big part of the growth sector right now. So small business often waits until the last minute to hire, and when they do hire, they want to hire people who can do a lot of different things. So they're apt, or startups, they're apt to want to have somebody come in who can wear 10 different hats. So the more cross-functional, again, you can be, the more marketable you become in more different support arenas. So that's the answer to that question. And what employers are looking for, that's a really good question. I would say employers are looking for people who really want what they have and will stay. What's happened in the last 5 or 10 years is the whole contract of loyalty, because of the churn of companies coming and going, especially there in the Valley. People stopped being overly loyal to their employers. So there's really a yearning that our clients have for people to stay a long time. So there's a lot of focus on why did people leave jobs. So if you do go out job hunting, you want to really have clarity about the fact many times in the Valley especially, companies went out of business and people had to leave after 2 or 3 years. So what companies are looking for are those top-notch skills. They're looking for strong verbal and written communication skills. They're looking for somebody who wants what they have and will stay a long time, and who are aligned with their values and their culture. So, it's a lot of what I think employees are looking for too.
Right. So the next question actually touches two of the things you talked about. You talked about self-reliance and managing up the organization. So this question is, how do you be self-reliant with a micromanager?
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
I think there are two parts to my answer. How do you be self-reliant with a micromanager? There's a good chance somebody's micromanaging for one of couple of reasons. First of all, they may not have ever had great support before, so they're used to having to check up on somebody all the time. Or if you're new in the job, they don't totally trust that you're going to do what they think you have to do. So the way to be self-reliant with a micromanager is to be patient and really be there, doing the job better than he or she could possibly have imagined. And then once a little time has gone by, 2 or 3 months, you might say, if it still happens, how about we play a game and you just assume I've done everything that I'm supposed to do until you find out I haven't, and then we can go back to you checking up on me all the time. Somebody did that with me once, and it cured me of micromanaging. But you might be stuck with a micromanager, in which case you have to take a look at that, because it may or may not be the right place for you to be long term. But in my experience, if you just wait 3 to 6 months and be the best that you can be, and then start managing up relative to pushing back on that micromanaging, you should be able to diminish some of it. But most of the time it's because somebody hasn't had good support and they have fallout from that and old bad habits from that.
Great. So the next question from the audience is, what advice do you have for teens in junior high and high school about how to find the kind of work that will be right for them and how to prepare it while they're still in school?
Yeah, teens in high school. So it's teens in high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would say it's never too early for them to be self-reflective and start noticing what they're good at. Very important part of a teen's growth is volunteering. I would really encourage teens to volunteer in areas where they have an interest, and start to really identify what their interests are, and not to worry about work when you're a teen long term. In other words, have them try as many things as they can. They say that the jobs that people will be doing 20 years from now, we don't even have names of yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for a teen to even know what jobs are going to be available when they hit the job market. But it isn't too early for them to get to know themselves, to identify what they're good at, and to stay abreast of technology, which of course they love to do, and they do better than we do, right? So I think, again, it's for them to realize that they are unique, they have special talents, they need to realize that they need to develop those talents and pay attention to what they're good at.
Great. All right. So yeah, so I think that brings us to a great webinar. Thank you so much, Leni, for your time. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. And we look forward to seeing you share more thoughts and advice with other members of Officepal community on officepal.com.
Dilip, thank you so much. And I just want to say again to our audience that we would welcome contact. And if there's anything that I can do to help people relative to understanding better how to move ahead in the area of executive support, I'm more than happy to do that. So I just want to offer that up, and I look forward to, Dilip, to further contact over time with Officepal.
Great, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for taking out time from your busy workday and joining us for this webinar. And please feel free to share your feedback and suggestions on officepal.com or on support@officepal.com. And in case if some of you have not yet signed up for Officepal, I think it's high time. We have several more exciting things that are coming up. We have our next webinar that's coming up on 30th May, so stay tuned for the announcement. And in early July, in fact, Debbie Gross will be conducting a training program at Cisco and we are planning to perhaps live stream it and have you all participate in that training program. So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining again, and have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Leni.